Well, welcome once again to the Aftermath. And this is Mick, the Doctor of Digital, your co host, and my phenomenal co host, Legislative Tiger, Kindra Reiber. We are here for the He Said, She Said segment. And this has to do with Dawn Richard, who we interviewed last week. And that episode is out. We want to make some comments, and we got a ton of things to share with you. So listen to the Aftermath, subscribe to the Aftermath, like the Aftermath, share it, and positively review the Aftermath. So welcome to the program. Kindra, how you doing today?
Good morning, Mick, or afternoon, wherever it is.
It's one of those. It's
Yes,
5 o'clock somewhere, as Jimmy Buffett says.
there you go. I
We-
always love talking to you. And, we usually set aside time a couple days after we talk to our guest and we review what they said in those couple of days. And I think you and I have so many nuggets after talking to Don. So I will tell the listeners, you need to listen to the episode. We're only giving you snippets, but you need to listen to the episode. It was really, really good with Don. It has been with our other guest as well, but
Definitely. Chat a lot of great things. I said that, we want to make this kind of interactive. Just children can learn compassion, forgiveness, the boundaries and what have you. And I said, one of the things that struck me is that we feel that we take on the failure of what happened and what we experienced, but then that doesn't mean necessarily that the kids are not going to be beneficial at some way or not benefit in some way. So that was an important point because, a lot of us take the burden upon ourselves and we think, oh, that's it, I'm a failure. And I think one of the things that she pointed out, because she was so positive, that no, that's not really true, that we're capable of being loved and we can also then give good things and good ideas to our children as well. So I think that's an important point to start with.
yeah, I completely agree with that one, Mick. I thought it was very interesting when I asked her about the timing because they had gone to therapy a couple of times and tried. And, even after therapy for a year, things went well. And at what point you decide that it's best for you and your children to separate. And I thought she had some really good insight on that.
And when she said about keep going too, because I think that's an important point. That's what you're picking up on as saying that persist and there may be lapses, as happened to her situation, that things went well. She said it was one of the best years that they ever had, but then they lapsed again and said, well, you've got to get to that point. But she did make a critical point, I believe, because then she said she got to a point where she said, I have no hope. And if you have no hope, well, then that relationship is done and you should really move on. So I think that's trying to discern where and when is therapy working and when do you get the point where saying no, because it takes two and it didn't work for both of them. And so she had to bail out at that point. That was a good point to suggest, because I can go into the transition. This was the tango dance. I love that. It was a great thing.
Yes, I thought so too, Mick. I thought you were going to go there with that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, I can't, I can't help it because, there it is. I have background in dance and interested in it. I wrote about it. So, I mean, I thought it was a very interesting thing. And she is a dancer, but pointing out the intricacies of tango, which is two people who are leaning on one another. And so she made an analogy to a marital relationship or any kind of relationship. You've got to be able to lean on the other. And if that's not working, well, then it takes two to tango. It takes two to untango as well.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. And then, she specializes in coming out of divorce. And when you're untangoing, right? Finding a relationship to love yourself again and finding yourself worthy of love before you get into that new relationship. So really taking time to digest and heal yourself. A lot of people have unresolved grief, unresolved, and it could come out as anger, right? It could come out as hurt. And so there's a lot of things you have to work through, not work around, not work out. You have to work through them. That's the only way you're going to heal.
And that was a critical point there as well, because if you rush into another relationship or a new relationship, which is what she pointed out, the problems don't end. And you're taking the problems that you haven't resolved into the next relationships or hopes and dreams. And all of those things need to be processed before jumping into another relationship, because the problems don't go away. It's the baggage that people bring with them. And I think when interacting with someone, that's an important question that early on, if you're developing a relationship, ask about those kinds of things. What has happened? You kind of check in with their emotional part of themselves to see if they have moved on or if they've still got something. It's a red flag. You start talking to somebody and they start saying all these negative things about the past relationships, which, I understand, but that means they probably have not resolved those emotional issues, and you bringing them into the next relationships. I think you have to be wary of that.
Yeah, she used I don't know if it's called an analogy, but where you work on yourself enough that you want to become whole and you want to have that wholeness versus the neediness. And I think some people get that a little confused because when we're so hurt, sometimes we feel like someone else is going to pick us up. Somebody else is going to fill that void. Somebody else is going to solve our issues for us. But instead, we need to work on ourselves so that we're whole and we're not needy, so that when we come into a new relationship after a divorce or a separation, right, from a partner, you're looking at yourself and you're really evaluating yourself on who you want to be as a partner versus who is the partner I want to find.
Yeah, that was like one of those key little things they're saying. Yes. So it had to do with identify, acknowledge your own feelings. I belong, I'm worthy, I'm capable of being loved. Watch out for the triggers that set your feelings off. And she had said, which I understand, because again, in and out of relationships, like, we're attracted to people that share our core values. Absolutely. You're looking for that person. You have to be conscious of your own feelings and watch out for the trigger words. But she did make that important point that you should be looking not for someone who is going to make you better, but someone who will help you become the person you want to be. And I thought it was really insight to say it makes me a better person. So if you're a woman, what will make you a better woman? If you're a man, what will make you a better man? That's what you should be looking for in a relationship. I think that was really, really critical.
Yeah, that was definitely key. And I think too, she touched on the past doesn't define you, but it's part of your story. And I know we hear this quite a bit, but I think it's good to be reminded that we have a past. It is part of our story, but it doesn't define us. It doesn't mean that we can't grow in between after a divorce, between a relationship, right? That we can continue to work on ourselves, become a better person for us that we want to become, and understand what we want in life as we move forward before we take that next step.
Yeah, I think what you had said during the interview itself, and you were a big believer in saying that therapy early on in a relationship is critical, or even taking part of any programs. So she had mentioned Marriage Encounter, which is a popular program for a lot of people, and any marriage preparation that you can engage in, but also in an early part of a relationship, be open to the fact that you could be talking to a therapist early on. So a third party person can often identify and separate. The thing is, I mean, emotions are so emotional, you're so involved, and they're easily distracted or easily swayed by them. And then that third party person can ask you some really common sense kind of questions. And I think, well, you can discern, is it my feelings? Is it the other person? And have they resolved all the issues that they had from a previous relationship or their past? Because I agree with your point. It's completely true. Our stories are our stories, but it doesn't define us. It doesn't make us who we are. And it's just a part of our past. So it's something you can relate and then talk about, but then also say that's not your entire story, because there's always the future, and you got to look positive towards something that's coming down the road.
Yeah. And in regards to that third party help, I know we said this in the episode, but I just want to bring it up again because I think it's so important. And personally, I experienced that when I first separated, or I guess we were going through it. I wasn't completely divorced yet. I reached out to a church group and went to their divorce group, and it was not for me. It was very negative. It was very, I felt like they were stuck. They weren't moving forward. There was a lot of grieving and a lot of crying. which we all need to do, but I had already done that. And I was looking at how do I heal and move forward and how do I become that better person? So that group wasn't for me. I did find another support group that was. So I want to encourage listeners that you might not find that the first group might work, right? But keep trying different things. Same with a therapist. I got a therapist and it wasn't, she was more shocked to hear about all of the turmoil in my divorce and what was happening from an alienation standpoint that she never really helped me. I left and I was like, I just informed somebody else, but I didn't get help. And so I think finding that right therapist is so, so, so important. So I know mental health is a big thing, especially coming out of COVID. It's much more recognized, but don't just go think that the first therapist is going to help you solve all your problems, because they might not.
And looking around for this has to do with support groups or therapy as well, because you had mentioned I did the same thing. I went to a single parenting group organized through a church, and there was about maybe 10 to 12 of us who were regularly attended, and it was mostly women. So then you think, okay, well, what's going to happen? You're going to have a lot of
Male
things
bashing.
bashing against men. And there was
Yes.
myself and one other gentleman there. And I go, well, I kind of made it a little bit more objective, because I think the ladies were started thinking, well, we don't want to bash all men because, there are guys here, and both he and myself, we're doing the best we can, but we also had a very difficult time. And so listen to us, I think it balanced it. And that's why I think that particular group worked out for me. And the other guy as well, too, he got involved in another relationship and was very happy. So, I mean, God bless him, because it was really worked out well for him. But that's it. You got to watch the groups. It's not necessarily the first group you choose. It's not just the first therapist, but sometimes you have to be more persistent and keep at it in order to find the right group for you. Because I think the point was something like, if this is just going to be a negative session, then you don't need that, because you don't need more negativity. You need something that's positive and upbuilding and brings you to a wholeness and makes you better than when you walked in the front door. But any program, I think just try anything would be good. Start somewhere.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Start somewhere. And you have a really good point that I didn't think of, was don't make sure your groups or your therapist isn't the same sex as you. I always think that's why we do the he said, she said episodes, right? Because I think there's different viewpoints on men and women. And I think we can learn a lot from each other versus just keeping in the same sex. And I think you go down that rabbit hole of, it's never my fault. It's always their fault because they're a different sex, right? So I like how you said that yours was a combined group.
And it helps because, I think this comes down to why you can have a healthy and positive relationship with people of the opposite sex. And this is why, because you have to grasp the fact that, one of the cliches that people will say, well, I'd like to find a woman who thinks like a man. Well, no, you don't, because we complement one another. We are not supposed to be the same. So what we want is another perspective. So in a good, sound relationship, as in a marriage, when you're raising children and you're making decisions, what you want is someone who doesn't think exactly like you, but can point out other points of view, and that strengthens the relationship, or it should. So I think I try, like, the point of companionship is what I think. You want a companion. And in my life, I've actually felt very close to a lot of women, my sister, my mother, and I learn a lot from them. And I think that's what makes me feel like a more positive relationship towards women in general. That's who you have to find, someone who doesn't think like you and doesn't say exactly the same thing as you, but points out maybe your blind spots, and you have to be open to those blind spots.
I like that, Mick. That's really good. The blind spots. That's good. That's good. Something else that she brought up, and I don't know if this is in your notes, but raise your hand up, right? So somebody can lift us up. And she compared it to when toddlers fall down, they're learning to walk. We help them up. We don't beat them down, and I think of the game of whack-a-mole, right? Where every time they come up, we're whacking them down, right? Instead, as children, we're helping them get up. We're teaching them. And so we want to do the same thing when someone's coming out of a divorce or a separation or a hard relationship. We want to be able to help them up. So raise your hand. Don't be afraid. I know in my personal situation, I had to ask for a lot of help, whether it's finances, whether it's just emotional support. I know there was times I picked up the phone and I just cried. I would tell my friend I'm okay, but I just have to cry.
Hmm.
Um, all of those things that we need help with. I mean, there was times that I needed to move locations within 24 hours, and I was able to do that and rent a house because I raised my hand and I reached out. And I think a lot of people hesitate with that. Our egos get in the way. And I just thought I found it so interesting. She said, raise your hand up and let somebody help you up, because there's lots of people that will volunteer to help you.
No question. And I think it's a great point to say, yes, like a child, we keep falling, but you don't kick the child, you don't push the child down, you put your hand down to help the child up. And what you're looking for in life are people who can do that, that can help lift you up and pull you up. And you have to recognize, first of all, that I need help, and you have to reach out. A couple of things along those lines that I thought also, I just definitely get these points in there. The point that she made, the annual contract with an option to renew. And that's like,
Yes, I
well,
like that.
love that, because it means you're constantly checking in with your partner and you don't take them for granted, which is what this notion would help prevent. That you're always optioning, like, okay, how are things working, in checking in with your partner and saying, if it's not working, well, okay, maybe we've crossed another threshold here. So you have to not take them for granted, because if you don't do that when you're in a marriage or a long-term relationship, this is what you tend to do. And watch the language. She would talk about the trigger words, something like, you always do X, and saying you, well, you should talk about your feelings rather than accusing the person, because that's how they're going to take it. You always do whatever that is.
Yeah.
They're not going to respond positively.
Yes.
But she said also the notion of, you're either building walls or bridges to your partners. But yeah, that's really good. She explained that one situation, she was laying in bed with her partner, and there was a wall between the two of them. As close as they were, there's still a wall.
Yeah, I thought that was a very good visual that we could relate to. Walls are a bridge. And it made me stop and think, am I building up walls in my relationships, or am I creating bridges? And I think a lot of that goes back to the words that we use and evaluating our relationships and taking that, annual contract with the option to renew type of, stance on it. So I just thought that was a very good visual.
Awesome. And activities, I like that too. She had said about get involved. And of course, Kindra is the best example of this. She does all kinds of stuff that I hear about. She's doing this, she's doing that. Really, really positive, really, really helpful. But any activity that you see that is not harmful, just go for it. And that's a great way, because you really get down and you can get depressed. And what you're not doing is what she is suggesting by the whole thing: be open to life experiences, curiosity, exploring, be expansive, networking opportunities. So anything that you can see is not a bad thing, go ahead and do it, because it opens you up and seeing the possibilities in life and not being just dragged down by the past. So yes, that was a good thing to look for healing in that way.
Well, and I think so, Mick, just to piggyback on that for a second, I think it helps, especially if you were in a long-term relationship and you really don't have self-identity anymore and you don't know what you like and what you don't like. If you say yes to any of the possibilities that are out there, and what people offer and put in front of you, I think you're redefining yourself. And so you're creating yourself again on what do you like doing, right? There was a movie, and you might know it, Mick, and it's not coming to me right now, but how do you like your eggs? And she did not know how to answer how she liked her eggs, because she always just did what her
Mm.
partner told her that she liked. So how do you like your eggs? Do you like them scrambled? Do you like them, runny in the middle? Do you like them hard in the middle? Do you like them poached, or, whatever it is? The same kind of things happen in life. And I think you need to redefine yourself after a divorce. And I think doing those different activities help that.
Yes, and made a point about how forests restore themselves after a fire. So yes, all of those things in a long-term relationship, we tend to get into this pattern, and we tend to get into the same ways, the same thing. So, you're really excellent point that we lose our identity. So if you don't know how your eggs should be done and this common everyday sort of thing, yeah, you've lost your identity. You have to think about it and say, well, maybe I want them poached today or scrambled or, in another way or that I haven't tried. Well, sure, you're being open to new experiences and open to find out who and what you're all about. But forests restore themselves after a fire. So after something which is really horrible, a forest fire, and again, lived in Pennsylvania, I saw this all the time, you see this big hill and there was a fire. And I watched it because year after year, I'd visit my family and I'd say, look at how that forest, remember that was all black at one time. And then we came back the next year, it's a little bit better. And then the next year, it's a little bit greener and greener. So yeah, those things are true in life as well, too. We also can restore ourselves and come back whole and positive, even after something really traumatic that happened to us.
Yeah, 100% agree. Did you have anything else, Mick? I know we had lots of notes and lots of little nuggets that we walked away with, and I know we're coming up on time. Did you have a few other things you wanted to say?
Just really, I wanted to finish with it because, yes, I'm pretty much had everything. But yeah, I agree with your point about just go and listen to the episode first because she had a lot of really good things. But
Yeah,
also,
it's hard for us to recap everything, right, from that
yes,
episode. It was really,
like
really good.
there's a lot there. But she also has the Wake Up to Real Love podcast. So in addition to this podcast or the Aftermath, also listen to hers because I think she's got a lot of good things to share. But also, if I can leave this with something else as a good catch line, she made this point at the very end, turn lessons into blessings. And it's like it almost rhymes. So I thought I really like that phrase. It sounds like, maybe it should be in a song or something, but turn lessons into blessings. That was pretty cool.
I love how you relate it to music, right? You relate everything to music, and you're right. That sounds like a song.
Everything is music. Everything is. So yeah, just part of my personality.
No, it's great. Actually, Mick, that leads us into our next episode we're going to do. So, we're not having a guest. We're actually going to share how we healed. And I know music is a big part of your healing. And so, in our next episode, we're going to explore that a little bit.
So don't be surprised if you hear some musical references. So Best Buddy's a songwriter, followed music for a long time. Yeah. So yeah, you're going to have some musics in there too.
Yes, excited to hear about it. So, looking
Sounds
forward.
good. All right. For the next episode, yes, look forward to that. There's going to be the holiday edition because we know, Kindra and I know that this is a very difficult time of year for a lot of people because it's the holidays. And so the emotions that you normally have really come to the forefront. So that's going to be our next episode. So that's it for this particular episode. Until next time, make sure that you are listening, subscribing, sharing, and positively reviewing the Aftermath. Until next time, see ya. Deus Volt.